To show how we're going to work with an API from the client side, I want to create a brand new Razor page. Just to simplify things and keep this functionality in a separate page so it's easier to find. So right-click on the restaurants folder. I want to add a Razor page. I'll just use the default template here, and I want to add a page that has the name Client Restaurants. I'll leave the defaults here in place. I do want to generate a page model. I do want to use the layout page. I'm just going to click Add. And while this is loading, I just want to point out that we could do this using Angular or using React or using Aurelia or using Vue.js, any number of different client technologies. I'm going to try to keep things very simple and just use jQuery and a jQuery plugin. But what I want to demonstrate are the same concepts that you would use with these other frameworks. So how to build an API endpoint inside of ASP.NET Core, how to invoke that API from JavaScript, and use the endpoint to fetch data in JSON format. That's what Client Restaurant is going to do. So we're not going to do any server processing. I'm not going to need an onGet method here in my page model. I'm really not going to need a page model at all. Instead, what I want to do is come into the markup, into the CSHTML file, and do something that typically I wouldn't recommend. What I want to do is go ahead and say that I want to render into the scripts section of the layout page an inline script that I'm going to include here in the page. So typically I recommend that you add all your JavaScript to external.js files, because those files are typically easier then to author and to test and to maintain. And they're also easier to bundle and optimize. Whereas embedding script into your Razor pages, if you do that too much, everything gets a little bit messy inside of the project. But I'm going to do this for this demo just to keep things as simple as possible. What I want to do is write a script that assumes we have jQuery loaded on the page. And I know we do because the layout page will include jQuery for me. So let's write a function that will be invoked by jQuery when the DOM is ready. And ultimately what I want to do is use jQuery to go out and make an AJAX call to an API endpoint that we will build. So let's assume in the future that I'll be able to come into this server and go to /API/restaurants, and that will be an API endpoint that I can go to, which will return all the restaurants to me in JSON format. We can also build an API where /API/restaurants/3 would bring back the single restaurant with an ID of 3, but going to /restaurants will bring back all the restaurants. And with the AJAX settings object, I'm going to specify that this request should be sent with an HTTP method of get, because we're not, again, updating data, we're just reading data. And if you need a refresher on using jQuery AJAX methods, I'm sure there's many courses on Pluralsight that will cover that topic, but this method returns a promise. So with a promise, I can say .then execute the following function. I expect the response to that API call to be passed to this function. But for right now, the question is, what do I do with this response? And this response, when successful, will contain a lot of restaurant information. But the question is, for right now, what do I do with this response? Well, ultimately, I want to nicely format that response into a table that a user can view. But for right now, to just see what's happening, let's log that response in the browser developer tools. And let's go ahead, before we even build our API, and see how this page behaves. So I want to go to /restaurants/client-restaurants. And let's go ahead and open up the developer tools, which I could do with Control-Shift-I from the menu here. And we're going to go look at the console. And what I can see here is an expected error, which is the server responded with a status of 4 of 4 not found. And that was on a call to /API/restaurant. So the next order of business will be for us to build an API endpoint that will respond to this request.